and welcome back to TSI Talks. With me today on the panel is FireSquid, a French publisher of strategy games. And not the entire crew, but 3 individuals have joined me and they want to talk about FireSquid and games. So I'm happy to have you all on board. And Simon, Antoine, and Louise, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm Simon Bachelier, Simon Bachelier, French name. I'm the line producer at FireSquid. I'm in charge of following all the studio that works on the game we published and to be in direct contact with the production teams on a daily and weekly basis, basically.
And I'm Antoine. I'm marketing manager at FireSquid. So it means I'm handling the marketing part of our company, marketing plan, marketing assets, and I'm working closely with Louise on the communication part.
Yeah, and I'm Louise Le Guen, a communication manager at FireSquid. So what I'm mostly doing is managing all our social media, the ones of our games and also of the company, doing some branding and also working with the influencers. So as Antoine mentioned, I'm working closely with him and the marketing department.
So you have the job I want one day. Good. Okay.
You want to work with the community?
Yeah, that's actually something I'm aspiring to do.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so first question, and this is probably, I don't know if you're able to answer this, but how did FireSquid come to be? I mean, I love the name actually, FireSquid. I'm fascinated by squids, and especially if they're made of fire. They're double awesome. So, but how did the company form?
Initially, we are part of Lightbulb Crew, which is our sister company, which has made Other Side. It's a developing studio based in France, and then our CEO decided to launch a publishing brand, really focused on strategy, but strategy in a broader sense, meaning that every game, which includes brain, from tacticals to city builders or any other game where you have to think, and that was the idea of our CEO. Because you wanted to diversify our activity here, and that's why FireSquid has been created and why we are here in front of you.
Pretty cool. I played actually Other Side. I didn't know you were attached to Lightbulb Crew essentially, so that's kind of cool. And how is it as a publisher, as a fairly new publisher, to go into a actually very competitive market like the video games market, because it's one of the most competitive markets out there. How do you plan on setting yourself apart from other publishers, apart from maybe we are specialized in strategy games?
So yeah, a lot of strategy game publishers are on the market right now. And what we want to offer is something a bit different. We all know that indie strategy games are something pretty interesting, but also there are so many different genres to it. So we want to also offer some services that were different from what other publishers are doing, that could offer funding or potentially marketing and communication support. And what we also have is Simon's part, which is the production part, where we help the developers. And maybe, Simon, you can talk a little bit more about that, maybe.
Oh, you sold me so well. I mean, I just want you to keep going, but yeah, thanks. No, I think, yeah, since we, as Antoine said, and Louise, we are part of the Lightbulb Crew studio, so we have a knowledge on producing games, or at least most people in the team has been creating or working for a studio at some point. So we are publisher, but also we have a strong background in creating games, so we know what the dev team are encountering during the development stage and what kind of help we can provide. And we often try to support not only in money and funding, of course, but finding solutions sometimes. Either it's about improving UI or art style, if it's providing help on any support development and so on. So we try to figure out developers solution for developers, basically, while still being in our publisher work. And I think this is something that really works with all the studio we've signed and the project we've been involved in so far. And it's a good approach. I think it's one thing that might be representative of what we do. In addition to the, we don't have like at the moment the editorial line, like what kind of strategy game we do is still in progress, because when you are a new publisher, you can claim a lot of things, but until you have released a few games and you have like a success, people will still expect you to wait for you, like know what kind of genre or style you have, and we still probably have our mark to make here, but we try to look at interesting strategy games that are a bit out of what exists. It can look like something but it always have a twist or something that feels a bit different, and that's what we try to reach for most of the game we are interested in, I would say. I don't know if like one of you, Antoine or Louise, want to add something on that, but yeah, I think it's the loop we try to have so far.
Yes, you're right. We're very close to the product. Also, yeah, like you mentioned, we're very close to the product, and we have kind of internal resource we can allocate to help developers making their games, and one of the most special distinction, I would say.
Okay. So before we talk a little bit about the games you have signed on, you are currently working on 2 projects. What I'm more interested to hear about is like, how do you go out actively looking for games to sign on, or do you wait until you get a pitch deck? And what are you actually looking for when signing on a game? What does a studio need to bring to the table so that you say, yes, this is worthy of signing?
So usually, like right now at FireSquid, we have a business development director that is mostly looking for games, contacting developers, or even on social media, or contacting people to look for new games. So we have someone dedicated to that. But we also participate in events, basically B2B events and networking ones, to just discover new teams and new games. So we receive usually a lot of people pitching us games, the indie games they are working on, and then we assess if it's interesting for us to work on them. So generally we do it together. We first have the contact point that is sharing all the info about the game on our Slack, and then everyone is looking at the games, what they propose in the pitch deck, and then we assess, we see if it's relevant for our editorial line and our budget, for example, but also our plannings, marketing plannings in general. So yeah, and for the requirements, maybe someone else can give more info about that, what we are looking in a development studio and when they pitch. Maybe Antoine or Simon.
Yeah, sure. Usually, when you come to pitch, we expect something like a slide deck that recap what the game is about, who's the team behind, what kind of experience you're gonna create or offer, and ideally a prototype. Having a playable prototype is often important for most of the publisher, obviously, nowadays, but it's because it's one thing to have a project on paper, it's another thing to show that, to demonstrate you can realize it, or at least like you have what it takes to do it. So it's usually a combination of both. Very rarely some people come up with an idea on papers or on a slide and doesn't have a prototype yet, but you need to have probably a strong background to prove that you can really sell the project without a prototype, which is like more harder. But yeah, most of the time it's always a presentation and a playable prototype or a demo or something like that.
And so once, let's say you have a playable prototype for a game, what would be, for example, an absolute no-no in that prototype that would completely put you off signing the studio on?
It's hard to tell. It can be if the prototype is not showing much of the game. Yeah, it's a very early prototype. could be a problem for us. What else? I don't know if you have other.
Yeah, usually it's, I mean, a prototype has to show the gameplay and the interest of it. It might be okay to doesn't have like final target rendering or something that really looks like the final product, because obviously you come up with a prototype. But if you don't have that in a prototype, at least you can show, you know, the art direction on your slide deck and show where you want to go with it, while having as you say, like a gray box prototype or placeholder prototype. It can be okay. It's just you need to prove on the side that where you want to go, visually speaking. But yeah, it's not easy to say what makes a prototype, you know, a go or a pass, because even sometimes you can have something that looks really great, play really great, but at the end you feel like, yeah, it's not gonna be the game for us, or like the kind of game that we can, I don't know, easily market or target. Because when you pick a series of game and you have it on your catalog as a publisher, you establish kind of a lineup, right? And if you go to all the different direction, at the end your audience is going to be so scattered and so divided that every time you release a game, it's not for them because it's new things or very different. So you have to figure out also at some point what kind of game you provide and you offer. And that's what I say, like, it's not really easy when you start and you only have like a few games on your catalog, but the more you go, the more you crystallize that and you sell promise somehow. So I guess it's really about also the feeling, like what's your game is going to tell, to whom it will be appealing, and yeah, what kind of experience are you offering to.
Okay, that is interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the two projects you have signed on. The first one is the Great Houses of Calderia. I admit that I don't have really looked into that one, but maybe someone wants to tell a little bit about that project so we know what it's about.
Yeah, Great Houses of Calderia is like a strategy game. Let's say it's a grand strategy game, but at a country scale, meaning you are embodying a family over generations, more on a country scale, meaning that we won't have a whole continent, but more focused on the country Calderia, of the island Calderia. And you have to climb the social ladders through generations. What makes the game stand out is really its artistic direction and its dynasty builder aspect, and also kind of RPG-like mechanics, meaning that you have a family and their members are living also their stories, like for Game of Thrones, Arya Stark has its own story arc, or Tyrion Lannister, etc. It's the kind of feeling we're trying to achieve with Great Houses of Calderia. We have also a conflict resolution system that is different from help us standing out against the competitors. Like it's in real time, and you have to select. You have to allocate resources to prioritize your objectives. I don't know if it's here, but that's yeah. And it's art style, which is kind of Renaissance style, and it's very wow versus other grand strategy games.
Yeah, and it's mostly in Renaissance settings, so we wanted to have this medieval feeling also to the game, that what makes also the art direction stand out. And it's a game made by Resistance Games, Finnish developers that did Company of Crimes, so they already know the strategy genre. It was just the first time for us and them to work on a grand strategy game, so it's a really interesting game, and so far we have some community members that are really intrigued by this game, and we can't wait to share more with everyone about it.
It really sounds interesting. So I'll put that on my wish list too now, like right now.
Thank you.
And the second one, which is the one I'm invested in quotations. I don't like using that term actually. Is USC Counter Force, because So from looking at it, I get heavy XCOM vibes, and I do love me some XCOM, but I might have a wrong impression. So obviously, I also want you to tell us a little bit about USC.
Yeah, so, I mean, your vibe is good. I think USC Counter Force is definitely a turn-based squad tactics game in a science fiction mood. I think like it's easy to compare that to XCOM, but I think it's at the end, the closer comparison will be the Space Hulk Tactics series. That will be even closer than that, even if it has something from the XCOM series, especially the first ones. Yeah, it has something more in the vibe of the Aliens movie meet Space Hulk. I think it's really the origin of that, and it's a sequel of from a game called USC by the studio Angry Cat, and yeah, it's really a promising one.
So the game is tactical, squid-based, where you have to destroy aliens and save humankind from the alien threat. So basically, yeah, it's a mix of maybe XCOM but more space Hulk with aliens. And what's really good is that we are here with a niche, and the first game, Ultimate Space Commando, already had a lot of players. So we are now with this title trying to reach out to these players, but also new ones, because the game is slightly different from the first title. So we want to offer something new on this kind of retro genre game. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. And Angry Cats is actually a two-person studio right now. So the lead developer is Alita, working on the development of the game, but also accompanied with Chaba, the game designer. So it's a two team member project, and it's a really interesting game. And again, we can't wait to do the early access release so that everyone can have a say and send us feedback on the game.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about what happened. It's not something really big or anything really bad, but you've taken part in, was it Steam Next Fest, or I can't keep track of all those fests that are every yeah. Exactly. And so basically what happened is USC Counter Force had a demo. Demo got a lot of feedback. I won't say if it's positive or negative because I don't know. But it was you and probably the studio as well. So together with the studio, let's put it that way, you decided that the early access is gonna be delayed. The early access launch. In general, I just want to give you personally a huge compliment for that, because this is something not a lot of people do, or a lot of publishers do. They would have gone forward anyways. And then, like, yeah, fix it during early access or whatever. And I feel like that is already a very good move. But just to also tell everyone how that came to pass, that you delayed it, and what was the process behind this decision to delay the early access launch of USC Counter Force?
So yeah, it wasn't an easy decision, obviously. Delaying a game is always something big, especially for the development team. But we wanted to do it because we want to give the best experience possible to the players and a good early access. Because we feel it's really important that players enjoy the game first and are not constantly waiting for improvements through updates or bug fixes. So we delayed it of a few months because it felt right, and as we could see on the community's reaction, people were really happy about it. And as you said, thank you for saying that, it was not an easy thing to do, but we wanted to go that way for everyone, the players, the developers, but also for us. Maybe Simon or Antoine want to add something about it.
Sure. Yeah. As you said, Louise, I mean, thanks. It's not always easy to, especially among the players that really expecting a game, to see it being postponed is often something hard to take, and sometimes community is like not as nice as just the word you say or the community on our end. So it's really appreciated because it's definitely an effort. But yeah, the decision was based on the demo. So the demo at the Steam Next Fest was good. People played it, and we got like positive feedback. We also had like constructive input of players saying, "Oh, could you like have this or this change?" Especially on the tutorial. The tutorial was very exhaustive. Like a lot of things happened, but it was like maybe too much. So we take the time to consider all the feedback we've got to see how long it will take to rework some of the elements while still working on the main development of the game, so all the feature we wanted to have for the early access. And yeah, after consideration, it looks like rather than the good move to take the time that we needed to make it to improve the onboarding, the tutorial, and work on the new features that we can't announce yet, but that's going to be here for the early access. And we would have not this feature would have not been there in the current early access if it had been released on time. And I think it would be just for the greater good to have both like a work on that and the tutorial. But yeah, it's a decision we've taken with the developer, and yeah, it's probably a wise one. And thanks for welcoming it so well.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that the issue is at the moment that I've been seeing, and I want to touch on that later. In the current gaming landscape, especially when you go into the AAA gaming industry, you either have Ubisoft who never releases any games. I just say Beyond Good and Evil 2, or their weird pirate game. I don't even remember what it's called, but it's like delayed ad infinitum. Of course, that's always a bad sign. Delaying a game once or twice is actually I think it's a very good thing, but if you delay it 50 more times, then you get into a problem. Or you get the other extreme end of the spectrum. It stems mostly from the fact that I'm a PC player, first and foremost, and I feel like PC ports especially aren't very well optimized anymore these days. You have launches like Callisto Protocol that are an absolute catastrophe, or Wild Hearts that was also an absolute catastrophe. Despite being a good game, Callisto Protocol wasn't a very good game, but Wild Hearts apparently is, so it's a shame that especially these kind of games get released in that state. So I think it's good that there's still publishers out there, even if they are really small like FireSquid, that take their time and have some semblance of quality control. Because that is something I feel like that is sorely lacking in the gaming industry at the moment. But yeah, maybe it's just me. So yeah. Talking about quality control, apart from now delaying USC Counter Force, which I would reckon is part of quality control, how do you approach quality control? How do you make sure in the end you will release a finished solid product?
Excellent question. There is different approach. I think all of them here could talk about this. Antoine could talk about the playtest sessions that we do within the community, and also maybe Louise about the feedback, how we gather feedback, and we track input of players during the full development process. On the production perspective, we have regular meeting and discussion with the developers. So we never let the developers, work alone for a long period and then, we come back. We always keep constant update and discussion, so we know what's going on, and they know also what's going on our hand. We play the build quite regularly. We also have people dedicated to do quality assurance and control. So usually every week we play the build, we check for bugs, we track for weird behavior, and we also have some playtest recommendation or inputs, because sometimes when you are developers and you develop your game and either you don't have the time to play your own game, because sometimes it's just like that, it seems a bit weird, but it's a classic, or sometimes you have played your game so many times that you don't have enough distance to really see what's good, bad, or how you should like change this or this. So we try to bring that regularly, like either weekly, monthly, depending on the team, the size, and the project. But we try to really give feedback, constant feedback, and process where we can spot from tiny bugs to big issue in a core loop gameplay. And this is like what we do internally on the production side, and being close to the teams really helps to understand where they are, because sometimes something is not good, but it's not the right moment to change that because they are working on another features and it's not going to be relevant before like the next 2 months, so you don't want to put the priority on the wrong element. But I think it's internally we have also this I would say this asset that really help regularly testing and see the game. And I think we can also talk about playtest, which is something different, just for the maybe for the audience, but like QA is really about spotting bugs, seeing that is the game behaving or reacting as the design is intended. Like this feature is supposed to play like this. Why is it like behaving like that? Like I suppose like each like sword hit that you do with this character is supposed to do like this amount of damage. Why this is not doing anything on this monster? Or because it's a bug, but the developer didn't spot this because he was focused on something else. That's the kind of things that QA will spot and help the game to be really neat. While playtest is really about getting feedback on the whole gameplay loop, how the game is received, understood, and so on. And this is something we often organize. If Antoine or Louise, you want to add a bit about the process?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. So this part is really focused on player experience, players' feelings. They are not like video game specialists, they are players and they are the people we are making the game for. And for every time we have like a great update, a major update, or some system we want to test, we're using a playtester. So it can be like face-to-face, one-to-one playtest where I or someone from the design team is watching people playing the game, see their reactions, see if they understand the mechanics, the feature we're testing. Or it can be on larger scale, like hundreds of people playing the game, and after that, putting their feedback on Discord and on a Google form, so we can really see, have quantitative and qualitative feedback about the game, and see if we are going in the good direction, if the game is fun, if players understand what we think the game is about, or if the mechanics is working as we expected for players, if they play the game as intended to. And it's a really powerful tool in addition to all the feedback we're gathering on Discord in general. Maybe Louise, you want to highlight a bit this part?
Yeah, we usually collect feedback from Steam and Discord, but to give more of a concrete example, if some days the players after a playtest they all say that maybe our onboarding is hard to understand, or they don't know what to do in the game, we will just collect that feedback and then analyze it together so that we can share it with the team, FireSquid team first, to see where the focus should be on, and then with the developer saying, okay, people maybe didn't understand the objectives of the game, so we might want to add something somewhere to fix that. So it could be, for example, an objective window that is appearing or already somewhere on the screen. So yeah, it's that kind of things. So collecting feedback is really important for us because we want to involve our community in most of our processes. We are trying to be as more open to the community as we can, and gathering this feedback is really valuable for us for the production part, but also sometimes our marketing messages to know how to communicate to these players. If some days they say that they are really interested in one feature, this one in specifically, for example, I don't know, for in USC, the one jumping above a barrel, then we will maybe focus some communications on that. Yeah, it's good always to gather the playtest feedback for the production part. marketing part, but also the communication one.
And from time to time also it really depends on the design team or on the development studio, but sometimes our developer are asking like open question on our Discord saying, okay, I've been thinking of this design, I want maybe to do that. What do you think? Have you already experienced that? Is it something new for you, or do you think we're going to the good direction? And this is something we want to do more and more. But yep.
Okay, so you have a lot of steps in place to make sure that you get the right feedback, you give the right feedback to the developers, obviously. Because your game sucks is not the right feedback. So I'm glad to hear that there's publishers out there that still take quality assurance seriously, and obviously there's always a certain limitation to it because you have to work with the means that you have. So that's still great. Now if we look at for example, again, USC Counter Force, how to harken back to a question I asked initially, how did you find the game USC Counter Force, and how did you sign the developers on to FireSquid?
If I recall correctly, I think it was through a pitch that came from a GDC, but an online GDC. I think it was our CEO that has received the pitch, and then we met with the development team. They sent a prototype. I think even the prototype was at that time available on their website. We tried the game internally, and there was definitely some depth that we really liked. And really, there was a feature that we really liked. It was like point of view camera. We think we really like it and say, okay, we really need to meet these people. That's why we have started the discussion with them, and then see, because they were good developers and they had good plans for the game, we have decided to sign them.
Yeah, that. Okay. And how about House of Calderia?
So House of Calderia, basically, it was also like our CEO met the team at an event, then went into the studio for a visit to talk about like different pitches that they had for the next game. And at that time, they had a pitch for a dynasty builder game that would be a grand strategy game when you play on generations and generations, and you establish your alliance, enemies, foes, and influence through your family members. And that was the basic pitch. I think it was even like inspired a lot at the stage by what's the name of this franchise, very famous one?
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Thank you very much. That's exactly that one. And like they discuss a lot about the concept, and then on this one there was no prototype, at least no digital prototype. I know the team has like a couple of paperboard prototype for specific features. Like they had a very different approach to the conflict resolution at this stage that we have in the game nowadays. That was played around like a deck building games, but it was not really right. And they iterate, they discuss, and there was some back and forth on it, and then we decided to take a bet on it and invest in projects so we could like produce it and publish it. And yeah, that was like I think the first time they meet was probably 3 years ago, and then it was signed like 2 years ago at this beginning.
So you have FireSquid has currently signed on to projects. Now is the big question, because I also know that a lot of indie devs are listening to my podcast. Do you still have capacity for other strategy projects? So if there are any indie devs listening out there, maybe they could pitch you something?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now we actually have a few games already unannounced that we signed last year. But yeah, they could also send us their pitch or even an email just to ask to have a meeting with us. Our link to submit a game is on our website, so www.firesquid.fr, or on our social media. We have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we will reply. We will try to reply very soon so that we can either meet or just say that we are not interested in some project. But we always reply to everyone, so you can feel free to apply and submit your game through our form.
And as always, you can find all the links, all the relevant links in the description of the video. So if you want to follow FireSquid on Twitter, you find the link down there. If you want to submit your game on their website, you can find the website also down. And you can also find links to USC Counter Force and House of Calderia also in the description of the video. So please check everything out, wishlist, do your thing. And do that. So that was just a little advertising for you guys.
Thank you.
So let's just switch gears a little bit. So I'm always curious. You all said you have already experience working in the video game industry. You worked for light bulb studios before. That is probably correct, or is it?
Actually, Louise and I are working on Lightbulb Crew too. It's it's because marketing can also be applied and communication can be applied to Lightbulb Crew too. So we're belonging to both entities.
Okay, so you do double duties. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did every one of you actually get into the gaming industry to work in the gaming industry? Because for a lot of people that's like the ultimate dream job. I want to work in video games. So how did you get to live the dream?
I was at first I worked first in market research, but for big pharma companies for 6 years, and then I was thinking that I could really switch to a new era. So I did an MBA in video game management a couple years ago, and then I landed at FireSquid for me, which was a kind of
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I wanted to mention that we arrived at the same time with Antoine at Lightbulb Crew and FireSquid. But for me it was not going through the video game school, as we can hear now, is the kind of easy way. But I was mostly doing having some experiences around video games, not related to my studies or to my job. So I tried to join organizations. First, it was an esport organization where I was working on the Overwatch competition. So I was mainly managing the competition online, but also during physical events. I was a business development manager there, and I was also working on the logistic of event organization. Then I also joined Women in Games, another organization promoting diversity in the video game industry. So there I was doing mostly some communications job and, for example, moderating Twitch chats. So I also had a few experiences with Paris Games Week. So it's a video game convention in Paris that happens every year, where anyone can showcase the game, especially big companies, but also indies. And I was working for Ubisoft and also Nintendo, showcasing their game. So I had a few experiences in the video game industry before joining Lightbulb Crew and FireSquid. And I think what got me into this studio is my experiences that I got that were not related to my studies or anything else. So if I can give an advice here is maybe if you want to join the industry, you can always have a look at the organizations on the video game industry, join them, help them in many ways so that you can help the industry get known a little bit and network, but also learn new skills. So yeah, here it is for me.
Yeah, on my end, I think like I started working on the game field. Like more than a decade ago, I started in a science museum in Paris. Basically, I had a title called Video Game Project Manager, which is like sounds pretty cool when you work in a science museum. But basically, the idea was to think of how to use video games to teach science, sustainable development, quantum physics. I mean, any kind of topics you can have in a science museum, right? But by using video games. Can you use video game in an exhibition? Can you, like as a museum, produce or co-produce video games with a studio? And that was among the first experience I had by working with many different studios in France around this project and this idea. And then after that, I went freelancer and I work on a different project, mostly as a kind of a project manager at first, and then as a producer. And I specialize myself in working remote with remote team. So studio has sometimes a lot of freelancers to handle, or sometimes they have a different studio in different places and cities and countries. And I was like working with the teams that are scattered there and then to deliver like reinforcement on project or just side project. And from there to there, I worked with a lot of different kind of game over the past few years. But as Louise said, I can only say yes. I mean, even if you're not in the field, there is so many ways to join the field by attending events, by participating in events. Like there is a lot of festival, expo, I mean, things that can be local or national that always required some help or can be assist with. It can be association, it can be event, and this is a great way to get to know the people who work in that field, even if you have no direct connection to it. And that's a great way, especially if you don't have access to video game school. Video game schools are the new, it's like the new gold rush mine to the video game industry, but in fact they just teach you the skill set to be a specialized to get specialized position in the field. But depending on what you look for, some schools are not necessarily teaching or training in this area, or they try, but it's complicated. And being able to work or meet people in the field are often the best way to get into the field. And yeah, I would gladly recommend exactly what Louise said about being involved in a local association, go where things happen and just be part of it is the best way to get into it, especially when in the job, especially in video game. I think it's probably the same in other in other fields, but most of the job opportunity in that field happen within the close circle of video game people, meaning that half of the job position announced are never online or never public. It's just like because people are there or just jump on an opportunity through a discussion or something like that. And it's probably true for other fields, but at least on video game I can tell, I mean, it's how things happen.
Okay, so very varied ways of getting into the gaming industry. Interesting. Yeah, like I said, I do want to work there too. Just haven't made it there yet, so but it's gonna be okay. One day I will join someone. Okay, so let's go a little bit into the video game industry in general and the current environment that exists, let's say. So if you look at the gaming industry as a whole, what is your least favorite trend going on currently? Let's start with Louise this time, because I'm just gonna pick her.
Wow, my least favorite trends. Oh, that's a tough question.
Because there are so many, or because you can't think of anything negative at the moment?
That's a good one. No, right now I can't find it. There is actually something that I must confess, is I don't play a lot of video games because working in the video game industry makes me sometimes being a bit sick of playing video games. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but it's the truth. So sometimes I just want to disconnect and not play. So I couldn't have recent trends that I don't especially like. I don't know, maybe my colleagues have more ideas about it, and I can maybe think about mine while they are answering.
Sure, let's do that.
Yeah.
I really don't like open world games, video games. Not because I don't have time to explore everything.
I just want to say one thing. Thank you for saying that. Thank you. And now I will let you continue, and then I will say something about that.
Yeah, because I don't have that much time. So if I'm buying a game, I want to enjoy the full experience. And if it's 80 hours, I usually don't have the time for that. Even Elden Ring, I think it could have ended way before the final ending, and I would be very happy about that. That's a trend. I'm not for content. I really like highly focused experience for 10, 20 hours are still sufficient even for an open world for me. That's a trend I don't really like at the moment.
Yeah, I think I can like jump on it. It's definitely the problem with that is like when it's become a trend and some publishers, studio developers just use and reuse the same things again and again, and it's going to be like empty of any substantial interest. You're just buying a sequel that is the same plus maybe new environment and new things, maybe a tiny bit feature or mechanics, but you are basically buying the same thing over and over again. I think like this is the thing that I really dislike in as a trend, sorry, when big titles are just trying to sell you a sequel so you can buy the same thing again and again without really offering something new. Usually, like two things that I don't like is like a sequel, that meaningless sequel. Like you just have new things, but nothing really new to explore. I mean, there is also a good example of that doesn't do that, but also games that try to just let's make a remake of that game. It's basically the same thing, a bit revisited because you can't sell gameplay from 20 years ago in the same way you will play a game nowadays. But basically, it's like better graphics and adapt controller gameplay, but it's literally the same. And I know that people love to play with nostalgia, like game you've played when you were younger or when you were kids, and you can show that maybe to your kids or other generation. But I really dislike that in a sense that it removes the room or the opportunity for new idea and new experience to arise, and it's so easy to just put money on something you can just reskin and rework because it's safe. It's a safe bet when you just put money and you just say, okay, we know what we are going to do, but just like nicer and a bit more control. I'm not saying it's easy in the sense that it requires a lot of technical approach and revisited a lot of things, but in terms of creativity, it's like dry. It's very dry, and while you are sustaining and investing in things that already exist, you're not exploring new experience and new adventure, new characters, new stories, and so on. And it's really really sad because I mean it's the same in the movie industry, I guess, but if you are constantly feeding with the same thing, you end up with something very narrow, and that's very sad for a medium that is known for emergent things and new story that are not necessarily based on existing novel, books, or movie. So just my take on it.
Okay, so I wanna hark in especially on the thing that 80-hour open world game. So the most problems that these open world games suffer, and that's why I actually put out a tweet today about this, is that they are mostly, not all of them, and some of them are really well done and well designed, so I think there's space and reason for them to exist. But we face the issue, like already touched upon, is that this is a trend. Like, we RPGify everything, so the numbers go up. That's especially a problem in live services. We just tag onto open world onto everything, and especially when you look at like open world games that are not very inspired, you end up with a lot of bloatware, like tons of side activities that lead to nowhere. And that's why I said today, and also that leads also to these like massive failures we see. For example, Forspoken. Forspoken was another one of those that bombed so hard they closed the studio yesterday. Well, they don't close it. They folded it back into Square Enix. But nobody liked that game, you know. And basically, it was just bloatware, like just only bloat on top of bloat, and nothing was really coming together and was well designed. And I feel like if they went another approach, if they like said, okay, we are going to cut it down, we are aiming for a 20 to 30 hour well polished, well concise experience, I think it would have gone maybe a bit better. And I feel like there's no need to attach everything or put everything into an open world, because what you end up doing is like you exhaust the player. If I play an open world game, I feel exhausted because there's so much always to do, and I always go off to side quests and what is this marker and what is this marker. And I can do that for hours, don't get me wrong, but when I then put the controller down, I don't feel like I've achieved something. I only feel exhausted. And I feel like that is a big problem. And I'd rather have them go back to the PS2 days, if that makes sense, where you had like these well-rounded games that came out that took you like 15, 20, maybe 30 hours at max to finish, and then you moved on to the next one. It's also a way to sell more games because players have more time at their hand. Just a suggestion, but yeah, it's in general it's a very bad trend. That's why I'm so on Antoine's side when there's no more open world games, please. So in what is a very good trend at the moment in the gaming industry that is going on? What does each one of you like a lot? Or wait, Louise, do you have a least favorite trend now?
No, I couldn't find one, but I had a few things to add on Simon's example for when he mentioned that there are some sequels, but nothing changes that much. I feel like it was something we could feel with Overwatch 2. That was just some slight rework on the art and maybe a little bit on some game design, but not that much. And I could feel that players were disappointed. I was a little bit, I could play a little bit, but yeah, on Simon's side, I agree with him. So yeah, but I couldn't find one for myself. Sorry.
I'm just coming out really strong right now and just say Overwatch 2 is a scam.
I cannot agree. Yes.
Because and that's another thing that pisses me off is you didn't even get to choose if you wanted to play Overwatch 1 or Overwatch 2. They just took Overwatch 1 away from you.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And imagine like how that feels. You paid $60, euros, whatever your currency is for that game, and then it just gets taken away from you. And they don't even give you a choice. I almost would call that like taking you as a gamer hostage.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the ranks were reset also. You had to do the whole ranking thing again, and for the experiences it's the same, because like you unlock or you buy things in-game in Overwatch, and the fact that they removed just Overwatch, the first one, was like just taking money away from players, I feel, because they couldn't give back how much money they spent on the first one on the second title. So I really agree with you on this one.
Something interesting is about the fact that you've mentioned before you mentioned like the scam thing with Overwatch 2 is like the hours you need to invest in order to feel you've achieved something on a game. It's the whole hours gameplay of a game is a big topic it has been there for almost a decade now, but it's among some publishers, but also among some audience, there is this notion of when you pay for a game, you need to have a certain hours tied to the price. Like if you pay for a game like 60 euros, 70 euro, whatsoever, you expect a certain amount of hours of gameplay. And it feels like the answer to that has been like just give them like more content or more things to do, so you can say this is a 80 hours games or whatsoever. But these things has also an impact on indie game developers. When we have people that have great games, great experience below 10 hours and even sometimes below 6 hours, depending on the kind of game you play, and you see reviews or people saying, yeah, I mean, that game is not gay, it's not good, it's not like interesting, I just pay like 15 euro for like less than 10 hours, it's not even worth it. It's like it seems to be like paying by the hours when you buy a game, which is really weird because you never do that with a movie, neither a book or this kind of a thing. And there is a kind of a weird tendency of the metrics of numbers of hours expected, and it feels weird. But in publisher, if you have a game developer that comes to you and say, okay, I have a great game, but it's a short experience, it's gonna be very hard to get funded because players seems to expect, even if people are not expecting like a huge amount of time, they have a kind of a minimum entry that is important. And if you are above a certain selling, it's not good, or it's going to be a problem or a flaw. It's weird to describe it that way, but you can really see that in the industry from audience and publishers' point of view, and it's really problematic somehow. Like people expect certain amount of hours for their money, and just like I want to be entertained for that amount of time. And it's the same, I mean, in movie nowadays, like most of the movie stand for 3 hours. This is the standard of Hollywood movie, which was absolutely not the case like 15 years ago or 20 years ago. It's now if you release a movie of 1 hour 45 minutes, it's like it's a small movie. It's it's weird. In a time when we have a lot of offer, a lot of diversity in games and so on, relying on long experience feels like a bit weird. I'm not talking about multiplayer game that you can play infinitely. It's really about like game with a single player experience and so on.
Oh boy, do I have to say a lot about that one. Should I? I will. So there's one thing I will always hold against. I mean, this is not an argument that you made, Simon. I'm aware of that. I'm just saying, whoever comes to me and says, I expect a certain amount of hours to play, I will always hold them against one thing. There is a little game that no one played when it came out, and it doesn't matter. It's important to me. There's a little game called Vanquish. It came out on the 360 and it came out on the PS3. It is one of the very, very best action games ever made, and I stand by that. And that game is 5 hours long, if you play it on normal. However, this game is so well designed, so well rounded, so amazingly polished that you can play it multiple times through. And I feel like that is something that people do not recognize anymore, or that is actually missing in today's game designs. Because I feel like gaming or games in general are still seen as kind of a throwaway product. So once you finish the single player game, you don't go back. And I feel like that is more a mindset that a lot of gamers hold, and I'm very much against that mindset. Because if you find a game like Vanquish that is so incredible well made, you can play through it multiple times and get a lot out of it. Just to give you an example, I don't know if anyone has played that here on the panel, but it's so well made that a cigarette can save your life in that game. Because the main character is a smoker, and they gave you the ability 3 times per mission to throw a cigarette out of cover so the robots get distracted. It's just insanely how much detail they packed into it. And also the difficulties are different. If you play on normal, you find different you will fight different enemy setups than you will fight on hard, or even on the highest difficulty on the 4th one, because they put so much effort into it. I've played like through it 4 or 5 times, and then what end we up? We had a 5-hour game times 5 is 25 hours. That's more than I've ever spent with any other game. Another good example is Choo Choo Charles that just came out. I know I haven't played it. I know it's like 2.5 hours long, but I know a lot of people replay it and try to speedrun it, for example. Where like why isn't that added to the value for other gamers? Like, I know maybe not everyone is into speedrunning, but I feel like that this obsession with I paid a certain amount of dollars, so I expect a certain amount of time is absolutely horrifically stupid. I'm just saying that now, and sorry for all listeners that expect that, but that's just my opinion. You can flame me in the comments if you want. I won't read it anyways. And also talking about movies real quick, I don't have time for a 3-hour movie. Who has time for a 3-hour movie? I'm getting older. Like, I don't go into the cinema, like, it takes me like 4 hours to watch that movie. If I go there, if I go back home, and then watching the movie, it's like 4.5 hours. Like, I don't do that. So yeah, rant
You
over.
and me both, but yeah, I get it. Yeah, I think like, I don't know, especially maybe it's a question of target audience, some player like that or not. But yeah, I mean the Vanquish example, it's an interesting one. It's a really nice picked one, and yeah. If you measure the game to the duration of its, I don't know, main story or campaign, it's a bit weird. But be sure that some people will do that, and at the end, it has an impact and an influence on game production at some point. This is sad, but this is this is what happens, and for whatever reason. And yeah, it goes the same. I mean, we don't talk about game as a service and so on, but this is something that is really, when your game is like normally like average size, but you keep creating content to feed the players and so on, it can be good, I think, but very few games manage to do so. But yeah, it's there is a lot of way to release a game in a good state and then find a way to release good DLC, good content, and so on, while keep the flame burning in a good way. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's another topic. I don't want necessarily to go that deep, but yeah, I think you wanted to switch to the positive things of the industry, right?
Yes, exactly. Let's talk about something positive. We have been negative way too long. So who wants to start?
I can for this one. I have more inspiration, I feel. For the trends that I really like right now are probably more a theme that is recurrent right now, is the fact that I know it's always been like possible, but I feel like now a lot of games offer the possibility to play an animal, and I kind of like that because playing human is, yeah, okay, it's normal, I guess, but I feel it can get boring, and playing animals is really nice, and the different things you can do is fun too. For example, with the game Stray, or even maybe Gibbon or Blanc. These games are really beautiful and poetic sometimes, but you can play as an animal, and I feel like it's great. I'm also thinking about more silly games like Untitled Goose or God Simulator, and I feel like I don't know, it adds something. The fact that we can play as animals and have some features or even gameplay mechanics that are linked to the animal you are. So I really like that. Yeah, recently I've played a lot of games with animals as the hero, so maybe it's why I'm saying that.
Yeah, I don't know if I should be the second one. I didn't try Stray, so I'm a bit sad, but it looks very cool. Same thing for Gibbon. I know people in the office are talking about it, but I didn't have the chance to try it. For me, it's more about the revival of the good old RTS. I really like this trend because I don't know, it disappeared a couple of decades ago, and now I see a revival. I'm really happy to see huge publishers such as THQ, etc., bringing new opus to their franchise, and yeah, I like this vibe in the strategy field. I really like strategy RTS, and I'm really happy and can't wait to be this year because there are a bunch of really good RTS that are going to launch.
It's hard to pick. I think there is good things. I like there is a lot of iteration, experimentation in bigger exploration around narrative system over the past decade that has really been happening in AAA games, but also small indie games, and you can really have an interesting story tied to great gameplay, or sometimes just great story within a system that is very simple, like even a visual novel. There is like really great things, and I also like the. I know we're not necessarily that far, but I feel like in terms of representation within games, there is like way much more diversity. It's not perfect, obviously, but I feel like we had an interesting progress among like characters you can play, main heroes, and people like that are represented in game are like very very broader than even like 10 years ago, and even more than 20 years ago. But yeah, from some time, like video game was associated to a certain narrow of player, which was probably wrong at that time also, but it was really easy to have always the same kind of representation of hero and characters. And nowadays it's like very broad, and it brings a lot of depth and a lot of experience that is really interesting. I think like the thing Louise, you mentioned about like also playing animals is interesting because it embodies like different kind of perspective and point of view. I mean, I was not necessarily talking about that at all, but it's really good, and it goes the same with topics covered by game, and it's really nice. I mean, I have a ton of name and title that comes to my mind. I won't name them all, but I feel like diversity in experience and representation of characters is really going in a good direction and could only improve, but it's nice compared to a decade ago.
Yeah, so just to give a bit of an example that just came out for a bit of an oddball game. It seems to be inspired by Undertale, and it's called Max Monster. Basically, you play as a monster that is protecting a little child, but your goal is actually not so much protecting her as to more as to not let her cry, because if she cries, the game is over. So that's a fairly interesting concept, for example. So yeah, I agree. There is a lot more, especially in the indie sector, and that's why I love indie games so much. There is a lot more creativity going on, and a lot more. I mean, they obviously use old style mechanics and everything, but they think about these mechanics. How can we make it different? How can we frame it different? How can we tie those mechanics into our story? Exactly what also Simon said with the storytelling. How can we just make better choices? And that's why I personally, and that's my favorite trend going on, is the bigger empowerment of indie games, I would say. More devs than ever have the opportunity to make games, just in general. And that is a very good thing, because making video games has never been this easy, like in no other timeline. We are living in a very good time right now, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I agree, and it's why sometimes we also receive some pitch from developers, that learned to code or to work by themselves. And I think it's, as you mentioned, a great thing that now anyone can like show their mindset and their creativity through video games. And it's a really good thing that a lot of tools or even resources are more accessible right now.
Definitely. So yeah, another interesting question. So I want to go back a little bit to FireSquid, since you are firmly placed in the video game industry as a publisher. Where do you see FireSquid, let's say 5 to 10 years from now on, in the video game industry positioned?
The best publisher in the world. No, I'm joking. Letting you reply, Ant.
No, I was thinking, I think the direction we are going to take, and the path we want to follow is like being an established publisher, and even less, being an established publisher in the strategy field in 3-5 years, and then and then in 10 years being one of the best publisher in the world.
Yeah, being a reference because that's obviously what everyone wants to become. Could be developers or even publishers. We always want to be the best and recognized for what we are doing. So I would say that, yeah, uh, becoming a reference in strategy game publishing is our goal.
So, question about the strategy game, because that field is so broad. Would you rather be known as a publisher that is just in general a publisher that publishes very good strategy games, or would you rather be known as a publisher that is publishing also or niche strategy games? Because there is a difference, and I'm curious what you think about that.
I mean, we are open to a wide broad of strategy genre. So I think, and we are really focused on innovative strategy games. So we can totally also publish very niche games. Yeah, we want to have games that with some overlap between the players. But if we think the game has something or is very different from what we have already seen, it's really something we could investigate. Yeah, I think we are very open in FireSquid.
Yeah, I think we aim for kind of both. I know it's not the answer you wish, maybe, but we really want to become a reference in the strategy game industry because obviously for the game we produce, but also for the events we are working on. I don't know if you're aware, but we are working with Hooded Horse, another strategy game publisher, on an event on Steam called TactiCon, which is a 5-day event celebrating strategy games of all kinds. So it can be some AA, AAA, or even indie games, and from all different categories to genres. And we had a first edition. It was in September last year, and we received a lot of good comment from the developers that participated in the event, but also from the players that were happy that we could propose a week of 5-day events about strategy games on Steam. It was composed with sales, so a few strategy games were on sales. They also have demos for upcoming games and also panels and talks so that the players or even other developers could learn more about the video game industry or strategy games in general. For example, one panel we had was Tactics in the Future, that was about the future in the strategy games, but also other things like the narrative design on strategy video games. So we really want to become, as I mentioned, a reference in strategy game by giving to the community a place that they can find where they can find great games, great demos, so upcoming games, but also some interesting talks about the strategy games. So we really want to add this and become part of this strategy game community that is huge, actually. So yeah.
I forgot to mention that earlier that we are really looking into games. We are also looking into games that want to establish an IP or wants to add content, wants to iterate on their brand or their game. I mean, actually, we are really open to games with like a long-term plan, saying, okay, if it's a success, we can add some DLC, we can add some factions, we can establish the IP. That's something I forgot to mention. I think it's important to say.
I feel like you have a good plan on getting ahead in the game, and I wish you all the best of luck that this works and that you become the powerhouse publisher in strategy.
Thank you.
Great.
And do me one favor. At any point, if you can offer funding or if you can afford that, pick up some oddball projects, because that's something we need more of. So I'm gonna do one or two more questions, I feel like, and then we are going to phase it out. One thing I want to ask is, so because I also work closely with another publisher and something along those lines happened. So do you have a plan in case a game that you plan to publish isn't gonna finish, or is needs to be cancelled for whatever reason, or even the dev jumps ship to another publisher, what would you do if that happens?
So the question is like, if any of the game we've signed, for instance, for whatever reason doesn't go well, and we need to, or we want to cancel it or move it, that's what we're gonna do. That's the question.
Yeah, that's the question.
I mean, that would be very sad. It's like the selection process would have been wrong, and then whatever happened didn't go well. Something broke, right? I don't know. I mean, if you really have a project that doesn't work, you can, I mean, there is a lot of choice. Releasing a bad game is probably not a good one. You don't want to have your game released in bad state, because it's going to be something bad for the life of the studio that developed it, and also the publisher will publish it. And it makes no point to sell very badly, poorly a bad game. You are not even going to get back money, so you better just like stop the project. We never had this situation, to be honest, so it's not something I can say, but I guess if it has to happen, usually there is a lot of solution. Maybe the developer wants to do something different and you're not agreeing on that, because you feel like it's not what you've signed for, so you can still let the developer self-publish or go with someone else. But the whole question is like, because you have a publisher, most of the time it's tied to an investment in the game. Like, a publisher bring you a certain amount of money to do the game, and if you decide to split part or go elsewhere, it's all about a kind of a negotiation. Like, sometime a studio can have signed with a publisher and then go with another one. What happens usually is like the other publisher pay back the money that has been invested in the first, by the first publisher, or at some point there is a recoup on the sales that's going to go back to the first publisher initially. I mean, there is a lot of solution. It really depends on the size of the project, the kind of the team, and the kind of issue you have. Because if the game has to be cancelled, I mean, it's because of a bad situation, right? It could happen, like, I don't know, studio cannot like fill the project anymore because, I don't know, they don't have they have problem, issue, money. I mean, a studio life is a company life as well. It can go wrong for many reasons. And if you have no way to handle this, you can't do much. But if it's about like switching paths and splitting ways, then there is solution. It really depends on the situation.
Okay, so you would be ready in case something went down.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think to be honest, if you arrive at that point without being able to see it coming, there is a huge problem, right? Because if you are close to the developers, what the hell they will hide something go wrong? Or, if something is not going well, you know it because you are constantly seeing the build, discussing with them, planning things, doing marketing and communication with them. So if something happened the bad way, you see it coming progressively, and you have to do your best in order to prevent that, or see why it's going bad, and if there is something to solve. But if something is really like from one day to another, things go really bad for a bad reason, is it something you can't stop? Like, someone died, or something really bad happened and you can't do much, or it's because you didn't do your job right. I mean, if you don't follow the things regularly, it's on your end. So yeah, same goes for the developers, of course, but as a publisher, it's important to know what's going on and be close to your developers.
Perfect. Okay. So I guess we are wrapping it up here. We've gone for 1.5 hours. It was an absolutely amazing talk. Does anybody have any famous last words before we go?
No, thank you for your time. It was really interesting speaking to you and very cool. So thank you for this podcast and this opportunity.
Yeah, I would say the same, but also that TactiCon, the second edition of TactiCon, the Steam strategy game that we had last year, is happening again in May from 11th to 15th. So if you're looking for games to buy on sales, or even play new demos of upcoming games, or just listen to talks about strategy game, you can join us there. It's on May 11th to May 15th. Thank you.
Simon, do you have any famous last words?
So thanks a lot, and looking forward to listening to the next episode of your podcast.
Okay, thank you. And I've been the Orchestratus for the Strategy Informer. You can also find all our links in the description of the video. And don't forget to visit thestrategyinformer.com for all your needs in terms of strategy games, and follow us on Twitter at thestrategyinfo1. Sorry, I need to talk to someone about that handle. all the links are in the description again, and thank you for listening, everyone. And I bid you all a farewell. Bye bye.
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 Thank you.
Au revoir.